ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Logical Nonsense Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Liam Wilson, and today we're going to be going over the Dame request trade, the long-awaited Dame request trade, and as well as some historic seasons in baseball from Shohei, Acuna, and Luis Ariz. So we're going to start off with the Damian Lillard trade. Many thought it would happen for many years. Didn't happen for many years, and now it finally has. Liam, you're one of the few Blazers fans I know, and so I needed to hear your thoughts on all that went down and what's going to continue to go down.
It's definitely going to suck not having him on the Blazers anymore, but at least in the direction that the team was going, I am not really surprised that he finally requested a trade. Especially over the past two seasons, they've really been more making moves for the future, kind of rebuilding. A lot of people always talk about Portland being a small market, not being able to attract free agents and that, but with some of these other teams in the past, like an example I can think of, this was a while ago, but Paul George going to OKC with Westbrook. Well, I think that was a great example of a small market team actually trying to make a big trade to keep their homegrown talent there. And the Blazers just never really did that. They kept thinking they could retool a roster where their peak was making the Western Conference Finals that one year, but really they kind of had a decent path to it where they beat OKC. They took on Denver really before Jokic and that team reached their own prime. And then they get destroyed by the Warriors without KD the whole time. And from that peak, they just never really made the right moves to build around Dame. They got rid of CJ, and I think a lot of people expected that they were going to try and land maybe a different type of star, maybe one that could be a bit better defense or complement Lillard's game better, but they never did. And right now, they have two top 10 players, Shaden Sharp, and Scoot Henderson. And really, I think it's just the best direction for both Lillard and the franchise to move in different directions.
Yeah. By top 10, you mean like top 10 draft picks, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think what you said about them not bringing anybody in, it's inevitable, especially in this day and age when you have all these different super teams forming, and Damian Lillard's a superstar. I mean, he needs a sidekick. We've seen it in basketball. You need at least one sidekick, maybe two, and he just never got it. CJ McCollum was the closest, like you said, and in my opinion, his best role is a role player as a third or fourth best guy and not your second best. And so it's just sad because I feel like he really was a loyal guy. I mean, he went to small school at Weber State, I think, and I mean he's always
Utah, yeah.
been kind of a loyal small franchise guy, and so it's just sad because I feel like he didn't really get what he deserved. He gave so much to the Trailblazers organization, and so to see him never get that back is kind of sad. Like you said, great example with the Paul George and that kind of thing. One thing I do want to bring up is where we think his best landing spot is. So after doing some research, some of the best teams available for him right now are the Sixers, the Heat, the Mavs, the Nets, the Knicks, and the Celtics. We can go by them one by one. The first one, the 76ers. Basically, trades there would include Harden for Dame, is mostly the trade with some other assets. First, I want to hear your thoughts before I give mine.
When it comes to the Sixers, especially after this last playoff run by them, if I were Lillard, I would not take Embiid seriously as a contending title partner. Maybe with a different coach, they'll have maybe a better attitude. But I mean, is uh Embiid is a great player in the regular season. He's very talented. I personally don't think he deserved the MVP this past year. I think that should have gone to Jokic, and there's a bit of a media narrative there. But really, he kind of had his kind of David Robinson versus Hakeem season there, where
Definitely,
obviously those two didn't meet in the playoffs, but he got the MVP and really didn't show that he was the MVP in the playoffs.
definitely.
So, in terms of Lillard's best interests, I don't think he should go to the Sixers. And then for the Blazers, uh, I don't really know what Harden would do for them, honestly. He just, Harden's still a fine player, but I feel like he'd be a little bit of a tank commander in a way, unless you try and get Harden and then flip him to another team for some young players or future assets too. 3-team trade or something, maybe.
So I'll tell you what I like about potential trades with that, and I'll tell you what I don't like about it. What I think I like about it the most is I do think that Dame could bring a different attitude to that Sixers team. He's fired up. He finally is in a position where he has a second guy, which we really haven't seen. He wants to win a championship. He's hungry, obviously. He wouldn't request a trade if he wasn't. And for the Blazers, the Harden hasn't been the number one guy in my opinion since he was at the Rockets.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, we've seen that story, but it'd be interesting, I guess, to see up until the trade deadline how he would do on that team, and how that team was doing with maybe Harden and Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, and I think they still have Anthony Simons,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that team could be have potential to be good. And by the trade deadline, if you don't like Harden on that team and you'd rather trade him for young assets, I think that's what you do. That's what I like about the trade. I think it gives them the Blazers a lot of options with the trade, on what they want to do. I guess any last thoughts before I move on to the next trade?
Yeah, no, I those are definitely good points. I agree with you about Lillard probably bringing a better attitude to the Sixers that could potentially help them. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of forgot about Simons on the Blazers a little bit, but yeah, no, he's that's another example of like a young talent too that they have. And yeah, it might not work out the worst if they got Harden and could just see what happens if that ends up being the case.
And I mean, don't get it twisted. I'm not a Harden fan at all, but I do know like what he's done to the league, and I know that he has had quite a big success. I mean, he's been to quite a few conference championship games, and I think any sort of success the Blazers could have right now could definitely would be a good sign for them. I feel like
Yeah.
hopes are pretty low there. So,
Yeah,
um,
boost up the fan base morale a little bit.
exactly. Moving on to the next trade possibility, and the one that we've heard about probably the most, the Miami Heat. The only thing that seems to be stopping this trade is that the Heat just aren't willing to give up the guys that the Blazers want. It sounds like the Blazers are having a lot of pushback on giving away guys like Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, and that's not necessarily, it sounds like, the guys they want. Um, we're not in the front office, so we don't know what they want exactly, but it's obviously not that. What are your thoughts about Miami, and I guess both sides of it?
I like Jimmy Butler a lot. That was a pretty fun run that they had to the finals there. So in terms of just from a pure fan standpoint, it'd be cool to see Lillard play with Butler and Adebayo. And I think too their attitudes would mesh really well because I think they're both pretty strict competitors and everything. They don't screw around. Um, but in terms of how the deal would work out, yeah, it would really hinge on. I think Tyler Harrow would be the most important player for the Blazers to get back in that trade. And really, other than that, I mean, Duncan Robinson, he kind of what's the word?
Inconsistent.
Redeemed himself a bit in the
Oh,
playoffs with his Yeah. Well, he lost the starting job, I think, in the regular season, right? And then
Yeah,
he had some good games in the playoffs and kind of showed his 3-point skills again. But from what I know, he's on a decently hefty contract, and I feel like, with some of those inconsistencies and worries over the past few, or ever since he really got that payday, it might not be something that the Blazers would want that much. So I think really the biggest issue is just kind of assets, and
yeah,
that and Lillard doesn't have a no he doesn't have a no trade clause, so he really doesn't have a ton of leverage in a lot of ways of where he ends up,
he
which
lands.
is
Yeah,
interesting to keep in mind.
it is interesting, especially since I think he's been pretty vocal. I mean, I remember the video of him listening to the Miami song, and I was like, dude, there's no way you know what I'm saying? But it is interesting because, again, how I think I talked a little bit about like, how do you repay somebody like Damian Lillard for what he has done for the Portland Trail Blazers organization?
Hmm.
Like, do you ask for his wishes, or do you, as an organization, say, we need to do what's best for our team? I feel like a lot of teams, for the most part, do what's best for them. But I would also say this is a different. It just feels different,
Yeah.
um, because the Blazers were like, we're not trading him until he asks for one, and now he's finally asked for one, and they're like, okay, now we will start looking for you. And so I think it's interesting to see how they're going to go about their operations because it's just such a different operation than, Kyrie asking for a trade. You know what I'm saying? Like and I know that's a
Yeah.
completely different story, but it's just an example. You know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
I guess one question with Miami though, too, if he gets traded to Miami with the success that Miami has had in the last 4 years, is he the guy that puts them over the edge, or is he the guy that doesn't? And here's why I asked that question. We saw with the Suns, Kevin Durant went to the Suns, but the Suns had no bench.
Hmm.
Teams who do well in the playoffs have depth. The Nuggets had depth and the Heat had depth. You get Dame, you've already Gabe Vincent isn't on their team anymore. Max Strus isn't on their team anymore. And now you're looking at trading away Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and possibly Kyle Lowry. Is it worth it? You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on the depth thing?
Well, it's kind of an awkward point too, because if this trade or these trade talks were before the draft and before free agency, there'd be a bit of opportunity to, say the deal got done, they ship off, yeah, Robinson, Harrow, Lowry, and they get Lillard. They would have some time to shop around in the free agent market for some role players, some depth players. Kind of, I feel like what the Lakers have done a lot in the past few years. Like when they
Yeah,
won their championship, they got AD, and then they kind of were able to pick up some other guys like later in free agency for not like nothing crazy. If I remember correctly, like Dwight Howard, for example, JaVale McGee, and that really
yeah,
helped them. But I don't know. It kind of depends. Like depth in some ways can be kind of I don't know. What I think about sometimes with teams with a lot of depth is I think about the Raptors that one year when they got the number one seed when LeBron was still in Cleveland.
yeah,
What ended up happening is that they had um, a really deep squad, and when they got to the playoffs, well, I mean, LeBron just kind of owned them and everything, but I feel like sometimes in the playoffs, depth is important, but a lot of starters are playing a lot more minutes. And I feel like
sure.
in some cases you can kind of just ride your guys and see if it see if you can go all the way.
Yeah,
Um I don't know. It's an
yeah. It is
interesting
something I just wanted to
proposition.
bring up because, and granted, Chris Paul got hurt, and so maybe that goes differently for the Suns if he doesn't get hurt. But him getting hurt, it all rode on Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. And it felt like everybody else, and even like, I mean, yeah, they had DeAndre Ayton, who is basically irrelevant.
Mhm.
But the
Yeah.
rest of, like, I just felt like guys would come off the bench, and I'm like, who the hell is this, and why is he playing? Because, like, they
Yeah.
added nothing to the game. Like, you looked at, like, teams like the Heat or the Nuggets, like I talked about, kids would come off the bench, and, I mean, like, Christian Brown or Braun or however you say it, that kid was freaking amazing. Come off the
Mhm.
bench and light a fire under everyone's asses. And same with the Heat, they just, I swear to God, they had unlimited reload on the bench. Kids would
Yeah.
come in, shoot threes, bring energy, and, like, that's what you need deep in those playoff runs to, like, spark things, especially when you're down. And so, I don't know, it's just something interesting and something I wanna bring up. We don't have to continue talking about it. Yeah, it's just something to think about because I think, yes, you do need to, like you said, build stars on your team, you
Mhm.
know? And I think Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, and um, oh my gosh, Bam
Bam
Adebayo,
Adebayo.
yeah, are a great three. But I guess it just poses a question: is that enough? So,
Yeah.
um, but moving on to the next one, and this one I didn't quite understand, especially because they just signed Kyrie. But the next one was the Mavs. And I wasn't sure in the trades I saw, Kyrie wasn't in the deals. However, I just don't see a team working out where you have Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving, and Luca. That's just too many point guards on a team. And I know Luca's not technically a point guard, but like too many kids want the ball in their hand dribbling up the court.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be the biggest problem with that one. Um, I just don't really get how that would work. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I honestly don't know a ton about the Mavs, if I'm being honest. Aside from, they traded for Kyrie and then they just kind of gave up at the end of the season last year.
Yeah.
Um, which is kind of interesting to remember that they made it to the conference finals the year before against Golden
Yeah.
State. Um, so definitely a bit of a fall off there. Um, I don't really know what to think about the Mavs. I don't know what kind of assets they would have in terms of like, yeah, if they wanted to keep that big three of Luca, Kyrie, and then get Dame. Um, yeah, I just kind of don't see them being particularly interested. And if they are, I would not understand that plan.
Yeah. No, I think that's, you're spot on. I think we agree there. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense on a team that feels like they have enough starting guards. Like, it's okay to have depth, like we just talked about, but there's a difference between depth and like too many people fighting for the like same position, I guess. I don't know. It just, the whole trade feels weird. Next possibility was the Brooklyn Nets. Um, After looking at the roster, um, they still have a decent team, actually. Spencer Dinwiddie's on their team, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton, Ben Simmons, Royce O'Neal, Dennis Smith Jr., Lonnie Walker, and that's pretty much all the names I saw that I recognize. So they actually have quite a few assets. Obviously, they'd have to trade quite a few to get Dame. Another potential landing spot. What do you think about the Nets?
I feel like the Nets trading with the Nets for the Blazers themselves, I think would be in terms of like if you got a few good kind of like young or role players with them. I don't think from what I've heard they don't want to trade Bridges,
Yep,
which
that is
makes
correct.
sense. I mean, it seems like when he got kind of out of the shadow, traded from Phoenix, he had a couple of really good games being kind of the first option there. So I think they want to at least have a season of seeing what he can do as in a bigger role. In terms of in Lillard's interest, I feel like it would just be kind of a weird fit because Bridges is a great player, but he's not a superstar. And if Lillard wants to win now, it just doesn't seem like the Nets are like there. And we saw
Yep.
how well it worked out when they were like, oh, yeah, we'll just build a super team through free agency. Um, and so it's like, it would be good for his like personal branding to be in New York. You know, you get talked about probably a
Yeah,
lot more than Portland.
exactly.
Even if you're on kind of the second team in New York. But yeah, I just feel like that one is more like I'd understand if the trade happened, I'd understand it a bit more for like the Blazers, but I don't really think it would be a good spot for Lillard to end up because it would just sort of it feels like he's in kind of the same kind of middle ground because especially when they blew it up, the Nets blew it up trading Kyrie and Durant. You know, they stayed the sixth seed, but they just kind of, you know, they were never going to do anything in the playoffs. Like they were just going to go. And who did they get beat by? Was it the Sixers in the first round?
They did lose to the Sixers in the playoffs. Um, first round. The thing, like you said, it does benefit the Blazers. And as I was talking about earlier, the Blazers kind of have the cards in their hand. And so if they do make a deal with the Nets, it benefits them a lot more than it does Dame, but it's not up to Dame at the end of the day. And so I'm not a huge fan of it for Dame, as you said. I think he definitely is stepping into a position where maybe 3 or 4 years from now they could be a championship team, but right like there I don't see a situation unless they go and grab another guy where they're going to win a championship this following season. And I don't think I'm saying a hot take there. They just aren't ready. They have a lot of good role players, but again, like, is Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson like a really good 2 and 3 best player? Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, moving on to the next trade possibility, the New York Knicks, the other New York team. Thoughts on the Knicks?
I think
And
the Knicks.
I can give you a little brief on some of their roster. So they have Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson. Brunson had a great year last year. He really kind of carried them in the playoffs a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they also have RJ Barrett, which those are pretty much their big three best guys that they have. They also have some other names, but those are pretty much the big three for them.
The Knicks, I think personally the Knicks sound like the most interesting trade possibility to me. I think Jalen Brunson is definitely after these last playoffs showed he's the guy on that team. He's the best player. Julius Randle, he's good. He's really good in the regular season, but I think if you look at his numbers in the playoffs for his career, he's definitely kind of been an underperformer.
Definitely.
Um, it would be interesting to see Lillard play for Thibodeau. Because Thibodeau plays his players a lot of minutes.
Yep.
He's a much more defensive focused coach, which
Mm-hmm.
would be good in a lot of ways. Like maybe it could help Lillard work on some of his defensive game being in a system like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, he'd have the big market being in New York.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think if the Knicks could finish as I think what the fifth seed last year, and then they took the Heat to 6 games, which considering the Heat made the final is not too bad. I think that if you had a trio of Brunson, Randall, and Lillard, um, I think you could definitely see yourself near the top of the East there,
Mm-hmm.
one of the top 3 seeds at least.
Definitely.
I feel like the Blazers would probably want RJ Barrett,
There
but RJ Barrett's been kind of I don't know. He's had an interesting career so far. You know, I don't think it's been anything like bust territory, but just kind of, you know, yeah,
yeah.
he's doing all right.
He's he's definitely I think if Dame's going to the Knicks, he's definitely in that trade.
Mm-hmm.
Among some other players. I don't know their entire roster like the back of my hand, but sure some role players are going there as well as some draft picks. Um, I don't remember a whole lot of trades where the Knicks are been in a position where they've had to give up a lot of draft picks. And so that might put the ball in their court. Some of the teams I've named, like the Sixers, the Heat, the Mavs, Nets. Nets just got some back, but um, Nets got a lot of back. But those teams don't necessarily have like a ton of draft picks because they've traded for guys. And so having the draft picks as well as like RJ Barrett could be something that the Blazers are attracted to. And so I don't hate the trade. I don't hate him being on that team. They've got a shot. I think it may not be this year, but could be like in 2 years. Um, but I think of the teams I've listed, the negatives are the least I've seen, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
They just I feel like the positives weigh out more of the negatives in this case more than the others.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I agree with what you're saying too for the next, like, few years. I think that definitely has, like, that's probably the best destination we've talked to about for, like, future kind of potential. Because just thinking about, like, Miami, for example, like, Butler's starting to get older, Adebayo's still pretty young, but it's like, yeah, it's kinda when one of, like, those core stars is starting to get a bit older, you don't know what's gonna happen with their performance in the future and that. Um, I think, yeah, the Knicks are probably the best kinda setup, which would be interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing him play in New York. I'm not a fan of an East team, so I don't have as much hatred for them as other fan bases would. Um, but it would be interesting. I think that's probably the most intriguing um, potential trade destination at this point.
And then our last one, which I feel like from our experience in the fraternity, this team we've talked about so much and they constantly come up. Boston Celtics. We just saw them get Kristaps. Most of the trades for Dame include Jalen Brown. And so that's something you have to look at. Is Jalen Brown worth giving up for Damian Lillard? That's the question you have to ask there. And then also, is it a championship team again? Can you win a championship with Damian, JT, and Kristaps? Um, I don't know. Good questions to ask, I think.
Yeah, the Celtics. Yeah, I mean, as you might have already known, I'm a bit of a Boston, in general, sports hater, but they've got an interesting team. The thing that I don't like about the Celtics, and that is their biggest issue, why they couldn't beat the Heat, not even just coming back from down 3-0, but even the fact that they got to that point in the first place was I don't really think any of the guys on that team have a killer instinct right now. Jason Tatum, I think, is the closest, which isn't to say they haven't had great games. Like Tatum had like 51 in that game seven
Yep.
against the Sixers. Um, but it just seems like I remember I watched game 3, where Miami, was taking them on, and they were just like it was just like they gave
Flat.
up, like, they just
Yeah.
stopped, like, caring. Nobody like, once Jimmy Butler, like, got into it and, who is it? I think, Grant Williams, right?
Yeah.
Like, kinda was chirping
Started
at him.
talking trash. Yeah.
That was just kinda it for that game, and none of them
That's,
could really recover for it or from
yeah.
it. Um, and so I think if Lillard went there, you'd have to break up the Jays trio. I think Tatum is definitely the better out of them.
Yep.
So keeping him would be, the easy decision. Jalen Brown, I haven't studied his game too much, so I can't give like a complete opinion on him, but from what I've seen, he just doesn't really do it for me too much. He's not a bad player by any means, but just kind of like, I don't know. Even if he's an all-star, it just kind of seems like he's just sort of like, I don't know, just on the court, doing his thing. Um, so I think Lillard replacing him would be an immediate upgrade. And I think Lillard could be, kind of bring that killer instinct, could be like kind of a Jimmy Butler type player to an organization and kind of give them that edge to win those games in the playoffs because they're still a great team. They were the second seed. They went to Game 7 of the Eastern Finals, and they went to 6 games against the Warriors in the finals before. And so I think it might just be as good a time as ever for the Celtics to just like have their almost Raptors moment, break up the pairing, swing a big trade, and just see what happens.
I like that. I didn't even think about that with DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. That's a really good comparison, actually. Um, I will say them getting Kristaps definitely puts things in a different perspective for me. I feel like it's kind of an experiment for the Celtics because they haven't really had a guy like Kristaps on their team. And we don't really know how he's going to do on their team, which is something that the Celtics kind of are taking a chance on. And if they're taking chances on, I think Damian Lillard's quite a good chance. Like he's a pretty good risk to take, and
Hmm.
I think for the Celtics, and we've been talking a lot about like which team benefits the most. I think the Celtics probably benefit the most. Um, it really depends on what the Celtics are willing to give up, and how much the Blazers ask of the Celtics. Like I said, I definitely think Jalen Brown is in that deal. Is that a guy that I think Brown's only 26 or 27, so he's still pretty young. He could be fun to play with. Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp and Anthony Simons. I mean, that's not a bad lineup.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure they can contend and compete with different teams, but um, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where Dame ends up. Um, I think my top three favorites from this list probably are Knicks, Celtics, and then Sixers. Just because I think those three options are the most interesting and I think would be the most fun to watch. How about you? What would be your top three?
Yeah, I'd probably say I'd like to see, as like speaking just as a Lillard fan here, I would like to see him on the Knicks. The Heat would be cool if they could work that out. And I think the Sixers could be interesting. The Celtics would be very interesting too. I'd just be a little butthurt that I'd have to have some rooting for the Celtics to do good. But I think they'd also be a great situation for him, like as a player to land in. So I would probably still want him to, want the team to succeed if he was on there.
Definitely. All right. Well, that kind of wraps up the Damian Lillard section. We'll move on to our baseball section. All right, moving on into our baseball segment. I wanted just to talk about baseball's been weird this year. There's been like a lot of crazy stuff happening, I feel like. We had a perfect game after we thought it wouldn't happen. Um, Shohei Ohtani has been absolutely insane. Ronald Acuna Jr. has been absolutely insane. And same with Luis Ariz. Um, First, we can start with the perfect game. I heard a lot of it won't ever happen again with how the MLB is structured. Pitchers are taken out too much. Pitch counts are watched too closely. What do you think this proved to baseball fans? Do you think that it will happen again after this? Do you think it rejuvenated like, hey, this is still possible? I don't know. What were your thoughts about the perfect game?
Well, my first thought, it sucks that it's a Yankees pitcher, because of course it's always got to be the Yankees.
Good night.
It was what is it? It's against the A's, which the A's are pretty bad this year, obviously, but I don't ever like the narrative of, oh, it's against such and such terrible team. It doesn't count because you take that A's team and you put them in any other level of baseball and they'll destroy everybody. You
Yep.
take all those guys and stick them on AAA, they'll crush AAA. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely, I think, rarer than it was back in 2012 when the last three happened, including Hernandez's perfect game. That was like the start of the drought. Um, I think it's just because the chain, like just the kind of usage of starting pitchers and the amount of pitches and that. Don't know if this is I haven't confirmed it, but I remember seeing something saying in that guy's perfect game, he had a inning of 3 pitches where it was just, ground out or fly out or something. So that definitely helped.
Yeah.
And it is interesting though, because a lot of the rules, kind of the rule changes, passed in this off season are all kind of they're working to speed up the flow of the game and they're working to increase offense. And so, larger bases, having just the pitch clock in the first place in that too. I think that's impressive that it happened with the pitch clock in the first year of it too.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but I don't know. It's I think definitely like the Tigers yesterday, I think it was with their
Yeah.
combined no-hitter. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be more the norm when it comes to no-hitters in the future.
Yeah.
But I think perfect games will definitely still happen. Because you look at guys too, like even Sandy Alcantara last season, he had like what 5 complete games, which
Yeah.
isn't an insane amount, but that's especially for this day and age, like that's a pretty good amount of complete games. So
Yep.
I think it's definitely still a possibility. They just got to make sure to keep their pitch counts low. I think that's the biggest
Exactly. I
deciding
think,
factor.
like you said, the pitch count's the biggest thing because the other day, like, and I mostly watched the Twins, but I know Joe Ryan's had a complete game. I know Pablo Lopez had a complete game not too long ago, and you look at those pitch counts and they're like 110, which isn't terrible. It's a lot, but it's compared to what we've seen like in those early 2000s, even early 2010s, like it's still nothing.
Hmm.
So I think like you said, if we can if they can control a pitch count and still have a perfect game, then it's definitely possible. It's so hard. Like everything has to align perfectly, and that's what literally makes it a perfect game. But I think it's cool. Sucks that it was the Yankees, but it's still cool to see it. I feel like a lot of things have happened this year that I don't want to say like rejuvenated baseball fans, but it definitely feels like there's more of like an interest that is coming back into baseball, which is cool.
Yeah.
I liked them putting the um MLB draft with All-Star Weekend. I thought that was a kind of a cooler thing to do today.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah. Um,
It almost like yeah, no, there's like they always reference I think what it was like 1984, I think was like a season that really rejuvenated the NFL where it was like Marino with the touchdown record and then Eric
yeah.
Dickerson with the rushing record and that. It kind of feels like there's a lot of like storylines going on this season where it's like, we just saw Aaron Judge like break the AL home run record last year, but I mean Otani's on about the same pace while,
Yep.
pitching every few days, which is
Yep.
insane. Arias is like, at least since I've been following baseball since 2016, is the closest I've seen a guy to hitting 400 for a
Yep.
season, which is really exciting. And then yeah, Acuna with some people are like, oh, kind of the new rules like the pitch clock, the expanded bases and stuff are contributing to stolen bases going up around the league. But I think that's cool. I think that's exciting. It kind of is lame when it's like, oh, a dude maybe steals like 30 bases in a season and
Yeah.
that leads the majors. Like I think more stuff happening like on the diamond is not a bad thing for the game. So
Yeah. And I think it's just gonna change how pitchers pick out. Like it's just gonna have to change. I mean, for so long, like we would watch pitchers just like throw, like try to pick off a guy for like I swear to God, 5 minutes until he finally
mhm.
threw a pitch. And so it definitely changes thing, the pitch clock. Like I don't know if I'm a fan of it yet. I'm not gonna say that, but it's definitely changed things to the point where like I feel like something as like a pace with a pitcher is so much more of a thing. And like you said, stolen bases are definitely more prevalent, but I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, especially for viewers. Definitely makes things more exciting. So it's just definitely something to look at. But your point on Shohei's perfect segue. He's hitting 302 right now, battering average. 663 slugging, 1.05 OPS, and then 32 home runs and six triples. Those last two stats are both first in the entire MLB. So he leads the league in both home runs and triples, which is just impressive. Um, and then we get into he's also a pitcher. He has a 3.32 ERA. He's gone 7-4 and is almost averaging 12 strikeouts per 9 innings.
Yeah, there's just like it's just insane. I think what is it? I mean, I know that a five tool player references like defense and like you'd say like pitchers, pitchers who don't play defense that much, but like it's like he's like a six tool player. Like he's
Yeah.
like the only guy who's like ever. I think the fact like you hear about Babe Ruth and stuff like that, and I'm not a huge fan of like clowning on old like eras or old talent being like, oh, they couldn't survive in this game and that because obviously it's like, well, they were born in the time period they were born in, they played like the
Yeah,
game that they played
exactly.
in, but the rules and the game has changed a ton from that era. And then also integration and that too is
Yep.
a adds to the player pool quite a bit. But I mean, yeah, even back then, it's like you'd hear about two-way players, but it's like to do that in the modern age with like how intense it is,
Yeah.
the conditioning, like it really is like the MLB is like the best of the world. If
Yep.
you're one of the best in the world, you play in the majors. And yeah, the fact that some people can work their entire life and they'll just be a pitcher or just be an outfielder or something in the MLB, but then he can be like literally one of the best at both sides of the coin
Yep.
is just yeah, I don't know. A lot of people like there were definitely people hyping him up a lot when he came to the US back I think it was 2018 originally,
Yeah,
which
around
is
there. Yeah.
weird that's been that long already. Um but I don't think anybody
Expected
thought
this.
he was gonna be this good. Like he could even be like, he could easily be like a dude who hits like what he could be at like 15 homers right now, hitting like 250 and then like pitching like near a 4 ERA or something. And it would still be crazy. He'd still be like about an average to above
Yep.
average like player on both sides.
Yep.
But he's yeah, leading league in is he still leading the league in batting average against
Against who?
like when he's pitching like opposing batting
Oh,
average.
I don't know that stat actually. But regardless, what he's doing is crazy, and he's like, it just it makes me wonder if we're gonna start seeing more players like him, and if teams are gonna start looking for more players like him. There was a kid that was drafted today in the draft by the San Francisco Giants, and he's a two-way player.
Hmm.
Um, and so he's a pitcher and a hitter, but he's 6'7", and it's like insane. And just got drafted out of high school. There's another player who's just like him, but I think is going into college. And so it really sparks the question like, are we literally seeing like the game? Like, I know we are seeing the game change before our eyes, but like that aspect of the game, like, are we going to continue to see more players like Otani, like a two-way player? Our team's going to like try to seek guys who can do that? Or does the focus change from, oh, I just need to focus on pitching to, oh, I can be a dual threat,
Hmm.
that kind of thing.
I think it depends. It's like I think baseball out of all like the professional sports in the US, baseball is definitely the kind of like most old timey or kind of traditionalist sort of like ways of thinking with things sometimes. Analytics, well, which is interesting. I don't know. Some teams have really embraced analytics over the years, like the Rays and that. I guess it just depends. Like I think it's really kind of up to like coaching and people who are helping these kids and younger like high school to college players develop more. Because being a two-way player isn't a crazy concept in like high school and that, but I think when you start getting up in the levels, it's kind of like a lot of people want it's like, okay, what are you best at, and then like stick with that and
Yeah,
focus all your
yeah.
training and that on that because it's hard enough as is. And so I don't know, I think Shohei having the success that he's had could potentially kind of give more of a, oh, it's like what if we let guys try this for longer, like what if we try and work on both aspects of that game because somebody's made it to the highest level and dominated. um but yeah, I think it's really just kind of up to the coaching and kind of structural aspects of like baseball and whether or not they want to help these kind of players develop.
Yeah.
If they do show kind of like the talent or the tools to be able to do both of that at the top levels.
So moving on to Ronald Acuna's season. Um, Another player who's just been insane around the board. He's a great defender, which is a very underrated thing about him. Like great defender, it doesn't get talked about much, but on top of that, 335 batting average, 41 stolen bases, 589 slugging, 1.001 OPS, 79 runs, which leads the league, and then 21 home runs. He is like the most balanced hitter slash like speedy guy that I've ever like not ever seen, but like right now, I would say he's probably one of the most balanced guys that we have.
Hmm. Yeah, no, he really is like kind of the definition of a five-tool player right now. He's always been, even with the old rules, like that's kind of one thing too. It's like I've seen some people trying to kind of discredit the stolen bases he's had this season to the new rules, and yeah, it's added a little bit to the ease of it, I guess, but he's always been a threat to steal bases. I think what he had a 40-30 season. I think it was 2019. No,
He's had some
or was
great
it
seasons. He
maybe
really,
20? Yeah. One year like that, which is pretty insane because like a 40-40 season has only happened. What I think the only two players to do it are Bobby Bonds and Barry Bonds,
yeah.
back before he started taking the juice. But yeah, it's really cool to see. I like power hitters in baseball are awesome, but I'm my kind of um old head thing with baseball is I like guys that can hit 300 or better, hit for average. And yeah, he's just really been doing it all. And 1,000 OPS is crazy too. And it's just, yeah, he's just
No, it's
dominating.
like you said, it's one thing if you can hit homers, but if you're getting on base consistently like that, like over 300 and like 335 too, like that's not even just around 300, like you're consistently being the guy for your team and you're constantly getting on base. And when you're on base, you're stealing bases. Like he is a pitcher's nightmare,
Hmm.
you know, because you can try to avoid him, but then you put him on base. Now he's gonna go steal, and then you go right at him. He's either gonna get on base again or he's gonna hit a homer because he's got the power. And so
Hmm.
it's I think he's a really scary person for pitchers right now. Um, and we've seen him go deep in the playoffs. That Braves team is looking very good right now. Um, and so it's cool to see what he's been able to do this season. And another guy who's had a historic season.
Yeah, I think the craziest thing about the Braves is that they won the World Series in 2021 when because Acuna got hurt that year, right?
Yeah,
He either tore his ACL or blew his Achilles, one of those major injuries. And I think that's been one of the coolest things about the game recently is that like these guys have been able to come back really well from their injuries. I mean, this is the best version we've seen of them yet after a major injury like that. And
yep,
I think even like talking about Shohei, didn't Shohei get Tommy John surgery at one point already? I have to
possibly. I don't know for sure though.
let me check that real quick. Um, but it's always good just to see yep, back in 2019, and then I think he might have been out 2022. I'm not entirely sure. But um yeah, it's cool to see that these guys, it's not just a death knell anymore and they can come back and be even better than they were.
Yeah, definitely. Our last guy I want to talk about, Luis Ariz. You and I went to a game. We saw this guy go to work. He's just one of those guys that's just like insane. Like he just sees the plate so well and knows how to get on base.
Mhm.
Um, and good things happen when you get on base consistently like that. And and I'm not like baseball is such a different sport than other sports. Like you can't. We've seen with the Angels with two prodigies, like one guy doesn't make or break your team, but I think him consistently getting on base has kind of been a consistent spark for the Marlins. Um, right now he's hitting 388, which is actually down from what he was at. I think it'd be extremely cool if he can get to the 400 mark, especially in today's day and age where you're having pitchers come in, especially late in games, and they're throwing 102, 103 consistently. Like
Mhm.
it's insane. That he can see the plate that well. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this, I guess?
I definitely have the same opinion about getting on base is always good. Some of the detraction I've seen from uh, about him, well, it's kind of most of the time I see any hate towards him this season is like when people are discussing like, oh, if he hit 400, like would he be an MVP candidate? And everyone's like, oh no, like Acuna's better and that, which Acuna's a more complete player, but anytime, yeah, you're getting on base, you're an extra threat to score. You could steal bases. Somebody hits a double or whatever else. You have that potential to score a run. Never a bad thing. Um, and yeah, I just like the Marlins came into Seattle. I think it was maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago now, and Arias, I think he might have been 0 for 12 during that streak, or he got like one hit or something. He really got shut down, and then he comes back and has like 2 5-hit games to get him
Yep.
back up to 400. Like I that's kind of what keeps me believing in the quest for it too, is that there have been a couple of times this season where his average has still been crazy good, but it's fallen away from 400 and he's been able to claw back up to that. And so um I think out of anybody, at least in the past decade, and from what I've watched, I think he's probably got the best shot to hit 400. So I'm interested to see, but I mean, I think regardless, you could book him as the NL batting title at this
Yeah.
point.
Oh, definitely. The reason I want to bring these three guys up is it's just crazy because I can't remember another season, at least that I know of, where we could potentially see two broken records and then one just like incredible season, like
Hmm.
just across the board from batting average to home runs to stolen bases with Acuna. I like it's just insane. And so you talked about like we talked a little bit about like 1984 rejuvenation. Like, is this the year that does it? Are like is this what gets people back into baseball? I don't know. I don't think
Hmm.
either of us know, but like it's a good question, and I hope so because like I do think like baseball is a fun sport to watch if you just kind of understand it. I know that sounds stupid, but like it kind of is like a sport. Once you understand what's going on throughout
Mhm.
it is a lot more fun. But
I think, I think with, baseball, it's, I think the ultimate kind of chess and planning game when it comes to North American professional sports is football, but I think baseball is a pretty close second just in terms of like each like I can't remember where I heard this from, but it's a team sport that's made up of individual plays, like aside from when you're running on the bases together or a dude, is throwing the ball to a base to get somebody out, like you're never really working together in a lot of ways um, to score or kind of like we're in football, a big thing is like, oh, you have the offensive line pushing forward to get your running back some space,
yeah,
but there's like a lot of suspense in it. um, there are a lot of tough decisions you have to make, especially with like bullpens nowadays, like how much leeway you gonna give your pitcher, how much
Matt,
trust are you gonna give them. And yeah, I think personally playoff baseball is like some of the most intense playoff like atmosphere, which I finally got to actually experience as a Mariners fan for the first time in my conscious life last season, which was very fun. Um, but I think when it comes to like the only worry I have with baseball is that I don't think baseball has any problems in terms of like the game, in terms of like the product they're putting out. It's just I feel like Major League Baseball itself is not good at marketing their players because um you know you have a guy like Shohei Otani, kind of a once in a lifetime player right now. And to be fair, like they are trying, like they talk about him on social media all the time. You see a lot of his highlights posted on various avenues of the internet, but they just haven't been able, I feel like, to get somebody like they need their like Michael Jordan or Tom Brady or something in a way, a guy that
yeah,
like everybody is gonna know and that could like really bring, or Ken Griffey in a lot of ways, kind of bring that swagger and like attitude with to baseball and like get a whole new kind of era of fans coming in. But I do think the season could be similar to like, as much as I do kind of rag on like the steroid era, the home run chases were super exciting, especially after the
yeah,
strike. And so I think this could be a good opportunity for them to yeah, it could be like the home run chase, sort of. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
we did have Judge's season last year too, so there's been a good trend of like some really cool stuff happening. So,
yep. I think the difference you mentioned this, and it's just something I want to bring up. The difference between Shohei and somebody like a Tom Brady or Michael Jordan, and it's so hard in baseball because it's so much more dependent on your team than I would say most. They like Shohei hasn't dominated the league. He hasn't had a multitude of championships. And
mm-hmm,
it's so hard in baseball to just like go back to back to back and have like a dynasty. So I feel like we need somebody like a Shohei, but like to be on a team that's going to win as a dynasty for them to,
mm-hmm,
you know what I'm saying, to be able to market like a guy like Michael Jordan or like a guy like Tom Brady or even somebody like LeBron, I would say too.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
No, I definitely agree. Because yeah, Jordan was like they've also kind of those examples too. They've been in some like iconic cities, like Chicago and everything, and like the Chicago Bowl was going on. A lot of the play having all their playoff success, and then Tom Brady obviously winning as many Super Bowls as he's had. Um, yeah, I'm definitely with you. Baseball, I think personally, like I feel like baseball has a pretty good amount of what's it called, parody. Like just it feels like every season there are a couple teams that are like you really didn't expect them to like put together a team, but it just works. Something clicks, and everybody's doing their job. But baseball, I think, is the hardest professional sport, or North American professional sport, to win a championship and sustain that kind of success, because it's like
Yep.
it's just dependent on so many factors. I mean, being a Mariners fan, you look back in the 90s when they had a stacked, like they had what, 4 or 5 Hall of Famers, even including what they had David Ortiz in their farm system, and they just had so many power bats they didn't need him. Um, and they, made the playoffs a few times, but like one season, I think they set the record for home runs hit, and they missed the playoffs because their pitching was absolute dog water. And
Yep.
so there's just kind of it's really hard to kind of have everything work and be able to keep that up for a long period of time, no matter how many, like, yeah, Shohei and Mike Trout, two of the best players like in the league, two of the best players ever, maybe at this point, and they haven't made the playoffs since 2013. So
Yeah.
it's tough.
Definitely tough. Who is your World Series champion this year?
Um, that one's a tough one. I like the Rays. Um, I haven't checked up on the Orioles recently, but I think the Orioles will win a playoff series if they make the playoffs. Um, the Mariners, don't know what they're gonna do. I'd love for them to win the World Series, but they've been hovering around 500 the whole time. The Rangers are good. I really didn't expect the Rangers to probably uh, get to where they are this season already. And then in the NL, I'd have to review that a little bit. I think the Braves are definitely the favorite right now. I think they just have the most complete team. I mean, what they played the Marlins recently, and the Marlins are good this year, and they just crushed them. Who else we got? The NL Central is weak.
Same with
The
the
NL
AL.
West, it's the Dodgers and the what is it? The Dodgers and the
Giants,
Diamondbacks.
Diamonds.
I'm gonna go sleeper pick. I'm gonna for NL, I'm gonna go Diamondbacks,
Oh,
and AL, I'll go Rangers for
okay.
AL right now. I wouldn't want that to
Rangers,
happen,
Diamondbacks.
but
Wow.
it'd be
What a
I'll pick
bold
some weird
prediction.
ones.
Who's winning that?
I don't know. I think if it came down to it, I think the Rangers just have a really good offense at this point. Um, but I like the Diamondbacks kind of young squad and everything, and um I think they could surprise some people. I wonder if
Yeah.
they could be like this could almost be like the Astros before they hit like 2017, their kind of trial year or something. So it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I personally, I know it's the easy pick way out, but I just think the Braves are too good.
Hmm.
Um, they've been playing incredible baseball pretty much all year long. They just hit 60 wins. I and they've been there before. Just adds up too much. I like it. I mean, I don't mind the Braves, but um, I don't know. I think it's hard not to pick them right now.
Hmm.
So, all right. Well, thank you, Liam, for coming on the pod.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
yeah, of course. We'll stay in touch, man.
Sounds good.
Moving into our next segment of music. Pretty lackluster week once again for music, which has been disappointing because there's been a lot of hype around this year, and I think it's mostly coming from Travis Scott, and we've heard possibilities of J. Cole, and now even Drake again releasing, but we still haven't gotten it, and we still haven't gotten that release where I can officially be like, okay, this is gonna be the album of the year. Like last year, I feel like there were so many great albums that came out, and really was a good year for music in general. So many big artists released. Um, and this year it just feels like the releases that have been made While there have been some good ones and ones I'm going about to highlight, they just haven't been up to par as to last year. And it's tough because I feel like once you set this standard, you expect it year after year, which is very unrealistic. However, we still want it as fans, and so it's just really hard as somebody who likes hip hop to see a down year. Um, Towards the end of last year, we had two great albums to finish off the year with Drake's "Her Loss" and then Metro Boomin's "Heroes and Villains." Going into this year, though, um, we started off with Lil Yachty's album. I can't think of what it's called right now, um, but there are some great tracks on there, and he did have probably one of the most interesting turns we've seen from a hip hop artist, with expanding his genre, I guess, and expanding his sound. There were some hits, some notable ones I liked: "Running Out of Time," "The Zone," and then "Drive Me Crazy." "Drive Me Crazy" is just a great summer song in general. But moving on, we've had some decent singles, such as like "Two Tens," where's "Painting Pictures," and then we had that Don's Oliver album, which was, I thought, pretty good for the most part. It's very replayable, something that's constantly in my playlist. There's some great features on that album as well. Um, Bus Stop's a great song. Same with "Private Landing," and then even a song like "Go Down." There's some really good songs. A sleeper album. It wasn't like, as an overall album, I thought like it could have been better, but there are some good songs. Ray Shremmerd's album was not bad at all. Um, in my opinion, probably the most amount of hits, or best songs that we've seen so far was just on the extended version of Tyler the Creator's "Call Me If You Get Lost." And I think, one second, "The Estate Sale." That's what it's called. Yeah, so "The Estate Sale," just banger after banger. Great extended album. Not extended, deluxe album. I feel like so many times we see artists try to do a deluxe album, and it's not like, it doesn't add that much to me. This one did. Like, there are so many hits, and it's interesting too because this deluxe comes out almost 2 or 3 years after the initial release of the album, which is another thing we haven't really seen an artist do. Red Veil came out with an album, and it was decent. Again, nothing crazy. Kate Mine and Amine came out with an album that was different, unique. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I thought it was like okay. Lil Durk's album came out. Kodak Black's. Again, all very like mediocre. Like, they're not like terrible, but they're nothing like we're gonna be talking about 4 or 5 years from now. Like, wow, I remember when this album came out. They're all very, I guess, mid. Kenny Mason's album, I thought, was very good, very well executed. Same with Mike Dime's album. Both very good albums and probably contenders as of now, halfway through the year, which is crazy that we're halfway through the year. As of now, are definitely contenders for album of the year, which are two names that I don't think people usually would consider in that conversation, but they should be considered considering the field of albums right now. Young Thug's album was very good. Definitely up there for conversation, and I feel like has definitely, I not revived this year, but it's definitely keeping it like, okay, there were like some good albums this year. Young Thug's album, Gunna's album was pretty good. So I mean, I'm not saying that like it's all bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just been very mediocre, especially compared to what we had last year. And I'm really hoping that these final 5 months we can get some really good quality projects. Um, yeah, I think we are in for a ride because I feel like from now till December is where we usually see some of the best, not best, some of the most quality projects I feel like are usually released during this time. But I don't know. I guess we will find out. All right, in our final section today, of course, our fashion segment. I just want to talk about a little bit with the whole conflicting ideas. So, with trends in general, I would say we're starting to move towards more minimalistic things. We've seen it within jerseys and sports, we've seen it in homes. As a fashion whole, minimalistic seems to be where a lot of our trends are heading. However, streetwear continues to zag within the trends. This trend has been kind of out for a while now. It's nothing like a new trend. But graphic tees are definitely not minimalistic. But instead, I would say are more of a nostalgic piece and a nostalgic trend. And so, what I kind of want to talk about is what is more important within the streetwear world, nostalgia or I guess following what's already occurring. The reason why I asked that is I think there are definitely different brands within both. Graphic tees, some come to mind and have been around for a long time. You of course you have your Supremes and your Babes, but you also have companies who have come up, such as like Cactus Plant Flea Market, in recent years. Billionaire Boys Club. The list goes on. There's a lot of streetwear companies who really focus on their graphics and are a very big graphic T-shirt brand. There's also trends within like PacSun I've seen, as well as like even a place like Nordstrom where they are just now selling those old school or Urban Outfitters is a good one too, where they're selling those kind of nostalgic looking graphic tees, which again doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, follow the minimalistic trend. It's interesting and it's something I wanted to bring up because you also have minimalistic brands within streetwear such as Fear of God, and others. They're not coming to mind right now, but the reason I want to bring this up is because in a few years from now, I feel like, yes, you can have both, but I feel like one side of the brand, like one side of streetwear, whether it's minimalistic or in your face graphics, is going to do better than the other. And at that point, those brands are going to do better, if that makes sense what I'm trying to say. When that happens, I guess I feel like we're constantly trying to define like what is streetwear, what is this certain type of category, and fashion is just not really like that kind of thing because it's constantly trending. For 2020s, I guess, I feel like we don't know where we're headed. I would say within the 2010s, we saw kind of our like super big hype culture just run the board in streetwear. Supreme was probably the biggest it's ever been and ever will be. Same with some other brands. Now does that continue, or are we gonna start to steer off into more minimalistic brands? such as the rest of the fashion world has been doing. The reason I ask that again is, are we going to start to see new brands formulate with those different concepts? We saw brands like Cactus Plant Flea Market occur because of the big graphic trend. And I would say we saw brands like Fear of God occur because of the minimalistic trends. If we continue to go into minimalistic trends, we're going to continue to see more minimalistic streetwear brands. The problem is, it, especially like graphics, you can get creative with. Minimalistic, you can only get so minimal with. And so what's hard about it is it's hard to be creative within being minimal. And what I worry about, especially with streetwear, is streetwear has been such a diverse category within fashion, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I love it. But if we're not necessarily getting a whole lot of creativity, we could see streetwear change kind of drastically, which isn't necessarily a good thing for a while, I should say. I mean, we always go in cycles, and so I feel like it could just be for a short amount of time, but it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. All right. Thank you for listening to the episode today. It's kind of a long one, but I appreciate you, and I appreciate you making it to the end. Make sure to follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're using. I'm trying to give you guys quality content over quantity content, and so be sure to tune in.